Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Immigration Updates and Q&A session for international students at SFU. My name is Jean Lomas, and I'm an International Student Advisor Immigration Specialist at Simon Fraser University. I am joined today by my colleague, Stacy Bryant. Stacy is a study abroad officer in the International Services for Students office and will be helping to moderate our discussion today. For those of you attending the live session, you might see Stacy sharing resources in the chat box from time to time as well. As we begin our session today, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kikite, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen peoples on whose traditional and unceded territories our three campuses reside. Now, just to go over our agenda for today, we'll first start with an overview of recent updates to Canadian immigration policy, as well as restrictions on entry to Canada. This component of the presentation is being recorded. We'll then devote the remainder of the session to a question and answer period. I know you all have many questions. We will cover as much as we can today. However, as things continue to change and new policies are being introduced and adjusted on a near constant basis in response to COVID-19, I may not have all the answers, and those I do have might change or could be changing as we speak. It's happened before. The information we share today is current to the best of my knowledge as of today's date, which for those of you watching the recording is April 8th, 2021. For those who registered for the live session, we will be sending you an email in the next few days with a list of resources you can refer to if you'd like to review any of the information from today. Now, let's get started. I thought it might help just to start with an overview list of the exact topics we'll be covering during our updates today so that you know what to expect. We'll go through these one by one. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because we will be digging a little deeper as we proceed through. So remote learning and your status. It would be a vast understatement to say there have been many changes to immigration policy over the last year. SFU shifted to online learning in 2020 in response to COVID-19, as did many, if not all, institutions in Canada. And this has continued for the majority of courses through the current spring 2021 term. For summer 2021, most courses will continue to be delivered remotely, with select courses being offered in person where appropriate. The list of summer 2021 courses with in-person components is available on the SFU website. And you've also just a couple of times in the last couple of months received some emails from SFU regarding fall 2021 planning. From an immigration standpoint, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, that is to say IRCC, confirmed very early on that remote learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic will not impact your study permit compliance. When it comes to the post-graduation work permit, which I know many students have had concerns about, the Canadian government has introduced expanded flexibility on post-graduation work permit eligibility for students studying remotely from outside Canada. So according to the information we have from IRCC, eligible students can complete up to 100% of their program remotely from outside Canada and still qualify for a post-graduation work permit, provided they meet all other requirements. You might have heard previously that you would need to spend at least 50% of your program studying in Canada to qualify for this work permit. However, this was updated in February of this year. Additionally, time spent studying outside of Canada through December 31st of 2021 can be counted towards the length of your post-graduation work permit. So this is not to say that you are required to arrive by that date to qualify for the work permit, but time spent outside Canada studying after that date will be deducted when calculating the length of the work permit you eventually receive. And this will apply to students who have been enrolled in a program that was in progress in March 2020, or have started or will start a program between spring 2020 and fall 2021, and either hold a valid study permit or have been approved for a study permit or applied for a study permit before starting your study program, provided that application is eventually approved. So it covers quite a number of student scenarios. Keep in mind, though, that you must hold a valid study permit to study if you are physically in Canada, even if your courses are being offered remotely due to COVID-19. So just a couple of notes on enrollment requirements. The pandemic has definitely created some really unique and unfortunately very interesting challenges for many students. And as a result, you might have decided to study part-time or take time off from studies. And as you're likely aware, your enrollment status at SFU does impact your ability to work, study, and stay in Canada. So in order to be eligible to work on campus and or off campus in the spring 2021 term, which we're currently still in for the next few weeks, students are required to be enrolled full-time and meet IRCC's work eligibility requirements. So although there was some flexibility on enrollment requirements back in 2020, this flexibility was not extended beyond the end of August 2020. So if you are in Canada and if you would like to work on and or off campus, you must be enrolled full-time in fall and spring terms for undergraduate students and year-round for graduate students. The only exception to this is your last term of studies, where you can maintain work eligibility while studying part-time only if you were full-time in all other required terms throughout your degree. Keep in mind, students who are eligible to work off campus are limited to working a maximum of 20 hours per week during regular academic sessions. So just make sure that you are adhering to this limit for your off-campus work if you're in Canada and eligible to work this term. Since the summer 2021 term is nearly upon us, just also keep in mind that current undergraduate students at SFU may take the summer off or study part-time in that term with no impact on their study permit, work eligibility, or post-graduation work permit eligibility, as long as they remain enrolled full-time in the spring term and will enroll full-time in the fall term. Eligible students can also work full-time during the summer term if meeting the requirements for a regularly scheduled break. And by full-time, in the context of off-campus work, if you're eligible to work full-time in summer, that means there's no limit to the number of hours that you can legally work. Although, of course, please make sure that you are being compensated appropriately for any overtime. Keep in mind that if the summer 2021 term is your first term at SFU or your last term at SFU, it cannot be considered a scheduled break and you won't be eligible to work full-time in that term. You may be eligible to work part-time if you meet the eligibility requirements. Most graduate students are also not eligible for a scheduled break in summer. Moving on to post-graduation work permit, students are required to maintain full-time student status during each semester of their studies, with just a few exceptions to be eligible for this work permit. So for undergraduate students at SFU, the spring and fall terms are considered as formal academic sessions, whereas the summer term is more flexible and can be considered a regularly scheduled break. For graduate students, formal academic sessions include each spring, summer, and fall terms. So those are the terms that you'll want to ensure that you are enrolled full-time consistently in order to qualify for a post-grad work permit. Similar to the rules for on and off-campus work eligibility, IRCC did announce some flexibility to allow students who are forced to drop to part-time enrollment or take a term off due to COVID-19 in spring and summer 2020 to maintain eligibility for a post-grad work permit. However, again, this flexibility has not been extended beyond the summer 2020 term. And therefore, studying on a part-time basis or taking a term off other than a regularly scheduled break or an approved leave in the case of graduate students may impact your eligibility for a post-graduation work permit. If you had a gap in full-time enrollment earlier in 2020, so if you were forced to drop down to part-time or take a term off, like I said, IRCC has stated an intent to exercise flexibility when it comes to post-graduation work permit requirements. If you have any questions or need advice on how to address periods of part-time study or time off in the context of a post-graduation work permit application, please contact us. And I see that there is a question in the chat on this topic. Hopefully I've addressed it in what I've just said with the impacts of part-time, but we can always discuss it in the Q&A as well. So one more thing I wanted to touch on briefly is the temporary grading option for undergraduate students announced by the university earlier this year. This is a temporary pilot grading system of pass, credit or no credit, or PCRNC, for undergraduate students for the 2021 spring, summer, and fall terms. We've confirmed that the grading system will not impact or change your enrollment status in a given term. So for example, if you're enrolled in 9 units for this spring term, meaning you're studying full-time and you end up choosing an NC grade for one of those courses that is worth 3 units, it will not change your overall full-time status for this term. So now on to the co-op work permit. In response to the delayed processing times on in-Canada co-op work permit applications, IRCC has implemented a temporary facilitative measure allowing students who are in Canada and have applied for a co-op work permit to start their co-op placements using the on or off campus work provisions under their study permit, provided that they meet the eligibility requirements and adhere to any restrictions. Note that the students who are eligible to work off campus under their study permit can work up to 20 hours per week during regular academic sessions and full-time during scheduled breaks. If you have any questions about this temporary measure, I'd suggest that you contact us directly for case-specific advice. Now, for students who are outside Canada, these students can work while their study permit and co-op work permit are being processed. If their school and employer agree, they can either accept a Canadian work placement and begin working remotely from their home country, or work for a company in their home country. If you're a study permit holder outside Canada and you need to apply for a co-op work permit, I would suggest contacting us directly to discuss your application options. IRCC's online system does not currently allow you to generate a checklist for a standalone co-op work permit application from outside Canada, and you can't submit an in-Canada application when you aren't physically here. So your options in this scenario may vary based on your individual circumstances, which is why it's really best to contact us directly to discuss. Next, we'll go through some key updates on study permit application processing and biometrics. So as probably many, if not all of you have experienced, COVID-19 has continued to disrupt application processing. It's disrupted so many different processes, not just related to immigration, but certainly we've felt a lot of the effects of the immigration disruptions. So processing times might be longer than what is listed on the IRCC website. Delays are to be expected, but if you are in Canada, please rest assured you will have implied status as long as you apply to extend your study permit before your current study permit expires. Please keep this in mind. If you're here in Canada, you must apply to extend your stay before your current study permit expires in order to maintain valid legal status as a temporary resident here. This has not changed, and I would urge you to submit your application before your study permit expires. If you're waiting on documents such as a renewed passport or financial documents before submitting your extension application and you aren't sure how to receive or if you'll receive them on time, please contact us before your study permit expires so that we can advise you on how to approach the application and hopefully avoid losing your legal status in Canada. If you're a continuing student outside Canada and your study permit has expired or will expire while you're away, applying for a study permit outside Canada is not considered a study permit extension application, but instead it will be a new study permit application that will be processed at a visa office outside Canada. Although you may start or continue your program remotely from outside Canada without a valid study permit, it's important to remember that you must have a valid study permit to pursue courses while you're physically in Canada, and you must be approved before traveling or returning to Canada. Since not all study permit applications are approved, and since processing times continue to be impacted by COVID-19, it's strongly recommended that you apply for your study permit as soon as you're able to do so if you need a new one to travel or return to Canada. Information about how to apply for an extension in Canada or a new study permit from outside Canada is available on our website. And after reviewing the guides, if you have any questions that aren't addressed there, please feel free to contact us. Now, biometrics collection is suspended or limited in many areas of the world, but study permits, visa, and work permit applicants who are inside Canada continue to be temporarily exempt from the requirement to give biometrics. For those outside Canada, deadlines to provide biometrics have been extended, and your application won't be refused for failure to provide biometrics during this time, but it won't be approved until you do provide them. So we recommend that you check the IRCC website for the most updated information on biometrics enrollment services around the world. Now, if spring 2021 was your first term at SFU, so you're just wrapping up your first term, congratulations, and you applied for your study permit outside of Canada before December 15th, your application may be eligible for the two-stage study permit approval process. And some of you may have received an approval in principle of your study permit application. It's just important to note that having an approval in principle is not sufficient to travel to Canada. So you won't be able to travel to Canada as a student until you have a study permit or full study permit approval. And if you're eligible to travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. And we'll dive more into that topic in a few minutes. One more very important update to note is that if you have applied for a study permit outside Canada using documents from another institution, such as Fraser International College or another post-secondary institution in Canada, before your application is approved, you must notify IRCC of the change to your school via their web form and include a copy of your SFU acceptance letter, as well as your confirmation of enrollment letter from GoSFU if you are enrolled for the upcoming term or the current term. If your application is approved based on documents from another institution and you did not provide documents from SFU, according to updated guidelines from IRCC, you will actually need to apply for a new study permit and wait for approval before you can travel to Canada. So if you're already holding a valid study permit, so the actual physical document and not just the approval letter issued from outside of Canada, but you've been to Canada, had the document issued and it's valid, and you are transferring to SFU, the process is a little bit simpler. You just need to notify IRCC of the change to your institution using the online designated learning institution or DLI transfer process. So now we can move along to start talking about travel restrictions, which I know are on a lot of your minds based on the questions that were submitted prior to the session. So the most common question we're receiving lately is, can I travel to Canada? Or when can I come? Or when do I have to come in some cases? So, this applies to new students who haven't been able to join us here yet, as well as students who are currently here and are wondering whether they'll be allowed to come back to Canada if they go back home for a visit. So again, there is no real one-size-fits-all answer to these questions, but there is an exemption in place for international students when it comes to the current travel restrictions. So I do want to sort of preface this by encouraging you to consider what will be best for you at this time, because there are really two questions to ask yourself here. Not only can I travel to Canada? But should I travel to Canada? Is it the right decision for me right now? So what decisions will best support your physical and mental health, as well as your academic success, all of which are critical elements of your well-being. I also would just like to clarify and reiterate that SFU and the Canadian government are not currently recalling students to Canada or requiring you to be here in the next few months. If your preference is to stay outside Canada and take online courses at this time for the spring and through the summer, you can certainly do so. On the topic of travel restrictions, the temporary travel restrictions for all travelers seeking entry into Canada are currently in place officially until April 21st, 2021. As COVID-19 continues to evolve rapidly, this date may be further extended. And in fact, many of the measures that are in place today were initially introduced for a 1-month period over a year ago and just have been extended month to month. So at this point, although we have this April 21st end date, it's still really unclear when the travel restrictions might be lifted, how long they'll remain in effect, or if there will be further changes made to the restrictions or exemptions. So it will be important to keep an eye on things as you make any plans to travel. But under the current travel restrictions, I can tell you a little bit about what the requirements are as of today. So as an international student, you need to meet the following requirements to travel to Canada. First, you must either have a valid study permit or have been approved for a study permit and have a port of entry letter of introduction from IRCC. If your study permit application is being processed under the 2-stage approval process, again, having approval in principle or first stage approval of your application is not sufficient for travel to Canada. You need that approval letter. Your application needs to be completely finalized. You also must be attending a designated learning institution or DLI with an approved COVID-19 readiness plan. By now, most of you are probably aware that SFU does have an approved COVID-19 readiness plan in place. Finally, you must be traveling for a non-optional or non-discretionary purpose. So what that means is travel is deemed discretionary or non-discretionary depending on your individual circumstances. And Canada Border Services Agency, or CBSA, will make the final determination on your eligibility to enter Canada at the port of entry when you arrive. If you're coming to Canada as an international student, it's going to be important for you to carry the required documentation, make sure your institution is on the approved list, which SFU is, and be prepared to demonstrate that you're coming to Canada to study. Generally speaking, international students who meet the requirements listed on this slide, that's to say they're holding a valid study permit or they've been approved for one, and they can demonstrate they're currently enrolled at SFU, should be considered to be traveling for a non-discretionary purpose. Please don't make any plans to travel to Canada until you're sure you meet the requirements for entry, including final approval of your study permit application or a valid study permit and a valid visa or ETA if required based on your citizenship. You may also need proof of valid medical exam results if you've been living in a designated country or territory for at least 6 months in the past year. A note on immediate family members. So immediate family members, for example, your spouse or common law partner, your dependent children may be able to come with you to Canada, provided they have the proper immigration documents and their reason for traveling is also non-discretionary. Generally speaking, immediate family members seeking to accompany you and support you during your studies in Canada, that's to say they're moving here with you to live with you during your studies, should be considered to be traveling for essential or non-discretionary reasons as well. At this point, non-essential travel to Canada, such as tourism or short-term visits, is generally not allowed. And for family members as well, depending on their country of citizenship, they may also require a valid temporary resident visa or ETA to travel to Canada. So just a quick recap on this topic and some considerations to keep in mind. The final decision with regard to entry to Canada always rests with an officer at the port of entry. So no one can really 100% confirm with you in advance whether you'll be permitted to enter Canada. Refer to IRCC's website for a list of documents that you're required to carry when traveling to Canada. There is some information in the student section there. You can also refer to our COVID-19 immigration and travel FAQ website, which includes some information specific to SFU students. The main document you'll need from SFU is your current confirmation of enrollment letter, which you can download from GoSFU if you're enrolled for the term. We are strongly recommending as well that you contact your airline in advance of your travel date to Canada to clarify whether there are any additional documents you'll be required to carry in order to board your flight. And last but certainly not least, please ensure you have the appropriate immigration documents and/or authorizations required to travel to Canada before you travel, and ideally before you book anything non-refundable. If you're unsure or have any questions, again, please feel free to contact us directly and we'll be able to offer some more case-specific advice. Now, quarantine requirements. We've had many questions regarding quarantine requirements, especially in the last couple of months. The Government of Canada has put in place some emergency measures, including both quarantine and testing requirements for international travelers to Canada. So first, all international travelers must quarantine for 14 days upon arrival, even if you don't have symptoms of COVID-19, even if you've been vaccinated, you are required to quarantine for 14 days. This 14-day quarantine period includes a mandatory stay in a government-approved hotel for those traveling by air while you await the results of the COVID-19 test you'll take on arrival. The hotel stay must be pre-booked and prepaid by the traveler and would be at your own cost. The 14-day quarantine period begins on the day that you arrive in Canada. I do want to stress that although it might seem very strict, the 2-week quarantine is a mandatory requirement. If you fail to quarantine, this can result in fines and even imprisonment. And after you arrive in Canada, a representative of the Government of Canada will contact you to monitor compliance with your mandatory quarantine or isolation. So it's really important that you comply with this requirement. There are also a number of required COVID-19 tests for travel at this time. So air travelers must take a test within 72 hours of the scheduled departure time of your last direct flight to Canada and show proof of your negative result. If you'll be entering Canada by land, you're required to show negative results from a test taken in the United States within 72 hours before you arrive at the land border. Alternatively, if you have previously had COVID-19, you may show positive results from a test taken between 14 and 90 days prior, and this would exempt you from the post-arrival testing requirements as well. For those who are not exempt, upon arrival at the port of entry, you'll be given a second COVID-19 test. You can pre-register for your arrivals test to make the arrival process smoother. You'll also be given a test kit upon arrival to take with you, and you'll need to follow the instructions to do a third test using that kit on day 10 of your quarantine period. Travelers are required to remain in quarantine until they receive a negative result for the day 10 test and until the full 14 days have elapsed. If at any point you test positive for COVID-19 after arrival, please make sure to follow any instructions that you are provided by public health officials. So there are quite a few requirements all related to ArriveCan as well, which is the Government of Canada's digital tool to help travelers comply with border measures. So all international travelers coming to Canada are required to use ArriveCan to submit their travel information before they can board their flight or before arriving at the border for land travelers. You'll need to provide travel and contact information, hotel booking confirmation if applicable. So for those who are required to book in a government-approved hotel, you'll need to provide confirmation that you've booked in one of those hotels that's on the list provided by the government. You'll need to provide a quarantine plan and a COVID-19 symptom self-assessment. You'll need to be ready to show your ArriveCan receipt when seeking entry to Canada. You must also use ArriveCan or phone, I believe, to confirm within 48 hours that you've arrived at your place of quarantine or isolation in Canada. And those in quarantine must complete a daily COVID-19 symptom self-assessment again, either via ArriveCan or by phone during your quarantine period. In addition to the federal government requirements, there are also some other places where you should register your plans. So the BC provincial government also has an online self-isolation plan for travelers to submit in advance of travel. This one's optional, but strongly recommended by our provincial government. You must also register your travel and isolation plans with SFU as early as possible once you know your travel date. This will help SFU better coordinate supports for you during your quarantine period, including providing any needed support to you with developing your quarantine plan. Now, if you've received final approval of your study permit application from outside of Canada, you should also complete the Vancouver International Airport, or YVR, expedited processing submission form. That will just help speed up the process of issuing your study permit upon arrival for those who have applied from outside of Canada. Again, this one is optional, but recommended to streamline your arrival process. Now, this is a lot to remember. I recognize it's a bit of a form filling party you'll be having if you're planning to travel. We will be sending you a list of resources after the session that will help you keep track and stay up to date on everything, including a link to our self-isolation guide, which is really a step-by-step guide on everything you need to do in preparation for your travel, and includes links to all of these resources as well. In the follow-up email, we'll also include a link to our COVID-19 immigration and travel FAQ page and the Government of Canada website on travel during COVID-19, which I personally find very useful as a resource to follow. Last, but certainly not least, medical insurance. So it's always important that you have medical insurance while you're at SFU and in Canada. However, it is especially important now to ensure you have adequate medical insurance coverage during your stay. For those of you who are located in British Columbia, the BC Medical Services Plan has made some temporary policy changes due to COVID-19, which you can find on their website. This includes providing coverage to students who are holding implied status in Canada while awaiting their study permit extension. The temporary coverage has been extended until April 30th, 2021, and you must apply directly for this with BCMSP. BCMSP is also providing coverage for medical services related to suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19 for individuals in BC who aren't eligible for MSP. On to GuardMe. So GuardMe at SFU is a plan that is meant for only new students in their first term. So this is a temporary primary insurance plan is intended to provide coverage during the 3-month waiting period for BC MSP. Continuing SFU students are not automatically enrolled in GuardMe after their first term. So you must apply for MSP if you're residing in BC. If you have opted out of GuardMe in your first term, and because you were outside of Canada, and now you'll be coming to BC, you can contact us to discuss your options for temporary coverage during the waiting period for BC MSP. Because during this waiting period, it's strongly recommended that you hold some kind of valid primary medical insurance if you're in Canada, just in case, right? In case something happens. Now, for secondary medical insurance, which is provided through the Simon Fraser Student Society or Graduate Student Society, depending on whether you're an undergrad or grad student, for current students, the opt-out period for spring 2021 has passed. If you're choosing to opt out of the secondary medical insurance, you can't be added back for the rest of the policy year, which ends in August. So if you have already opted out during that opt-out period, you won't be able to add yourself back in. There is a retroactive opt-out period in July for students who have been outside Canada and haven't used the plan, but were enrolled in it. You can visit the Student Care website at studentcare.ca for more information on this so you can make an informed decision. Students who begin their studies in the summer 2021 term, I think there are a few of you who signed up for this session. You will not be automatically enrolled in the secondary insurance for summer 2021. However, you can opt into the policy if you would like during the change of coverage period, which will occur early in the summer term. Otherwise, You don't have to opt in. You will be automatically enrolled in the plan starting in September 2021 if you enroll in courses for the fall term. And that's the secondary insurance, which covers the sort of quality of life extras. It works together with MSP or GuardMe, which is your primary insurance plan and is the one that will the primary insurance is the one that will cover any medically necessary services like doctor, hospital, etc. Finally, I did want to sneak in a mention of my SSP, which many of you might already be familiar with. This year has been really hard, and I speak from personal experience there. And it can be helpful to talk to someone if you're having a difficult time. My SSP offers free confidential counseling and mental health support services in multiple languages, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to SFU students. You can download the app at the link that's here on the screen, and I encourage you to reach out and use this service if you think it might be helpful for you. So thank you so much for your patience going through all these updates. I know there's a lot of information packed in this session. We're now going to move on to our question and answer session for live participants. I'm going to end the recording in a moment. So for those of you watching the recording, thank you for watching. We hope to see you again in a future workshop or in one-on-one advising.